I'm sitting in the chair now that I pumped for so long in my bedroom. And I had just done it for so long that for me to even think about pumping anywhere else in the house was just really weird to me. Like, this is my pumping chair, But I can't remember the last time I pumped, and I got up in the morning and I said, I am not doing this anymore. I just looked at my pump and said, I'm done. Like, I just hit the wall and said, I can't do it. One more time.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. This is episode number 67, and I am your host, Lori Jill Eisenstadt, IBCLC. I have something new to share with you. I now have an All About Breastfeeding community Facebook page. You just go into Facebook and you search for All About Breastfeeding community, and I would love for you to join us. We'll be talking about the different shows that I've had on, the different speakers, and the different authors and the books. And my hope is that you will engage with each other and support each other on your breastfeeding journey. So search for me and join. On today's show, I would like to have a little warning added to it. I had a wonderful guest on today's show, and her name is Marguerite, and we talk about so much during the show. We talked about birth, breastfeeding, how her personal experiences led to her to become an IBCLC. We chat about newborn mothering and how great it is to join mothers groups. She shares the story of her 3 births, and I want to warn my listeners that there's a small portion where Marguerite talks about her 3rd birth, which was pretty intense. For some it might be scary, and it's definitely very traumatic. It is quite an emotional story. And I had tears, she had tears. I don't know if you'll hear mine. I tried to hold them back. But of course, I encourage you to listen to the whole story. However, if you feel you're in a vulnerable space, an emotional space, and it's too difficult to hear a birth story, I still want you to hear the whole show. So what I do is encourage you to listen up until about the 16-minute mark, and then fast forward until you get to the 25-minute mark so you can enjoy the rest of the show. Let's get started. My guest today is a wife and mother of 3 kids and is from Toledo, Ohio. She has been a labor and delivery nurse for 19 years. As a result of a disastrous delivery and having a baby with cleft lip and palate, she is very passionate and outspoken about breastfeeding, VBAC, reducing the cesarean section rates, especially the first one, and natural birth, even though she never had one. 3 years ago, she became an IBCLC, yay, as a result of her experiences. In her free time, and I always love when mothers say that, free time, right? Enjoys reading a lot. Marguerite is a self-proclaimed birth junkie. Welcome, Marguerite Grill, to the All About Breastfeeding show. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's so exciting.
Yeah, you got a lot going on. It's like you have all these different deliveries, and I'm sure that you could appreciate the joke, but, nothing like having a labor and delivery nurse with all kinds of challenges, right?
Oh, my gosh, it's so true. It was so true.
It's almost as if you just have to have all those ones under your belt because you want to help every mom who walks in your door and have those experiences, right?
Right. I wear many hats, so it's good.
You wear many hats, yes. So we're going to talk a little bit all about that. Let's begin by having you share with us a little bit of background about what life was like for you and the family you grew up in.
I grew up in southern Indiana in a super, super small town. And I was one of 4 girls. I was number 2 in there. I pretty much had a great childhood. I mean, it was very typical. My mom stayed home. My dad works. It was great. It was a great childhood. And then we moved to Toledo when I was about 16, which was like as horrific as it sounds as a teenager. And I've been really here ever since. I did go away to school, but I've been here since.
16, so you had all your friends, all your people,
Yeah.
and then you're stripped away from them.
And the boyfriend, right? The boyfriend.
Oh, my goodness. How did your parents even think they could ever get away with doing that?
It's terrible.
You probably have, like, I had diaries when I was a kid, but if you did have diaries, they were filled with all kinds of sordid details about that separation.
Oh, the tears and the drama. It was something.
The drama. Oh, yeah. And now you probably look back at, I mean, you feel for that girl, but you probably laugh too.
Oh, gosh. Ridiculous.
In the scheme of things, how inconsequential, but at the moment.
Yeah, that's your whole world.
So when you were young, were you thinking about becoming a nurse and better still working in labor and delivery? What were your aspirations, if you remember?
You know, I remember from a very young age that I always wanted to be a nurse. Now, I don't even know where that came from because we have really no medical people in my family. And so when I went to school, I went to a very small college, and it was kind of a liberal arts place. And so I did major in biology because I thought I'm going to do something in the medical field. And I considered going to med school, but it really wasn't the right fit for me. And then around my senior year, I decided, you know what, I want to be a midwife. So, which never actually happened, but so then I had to go to nursing school after that. So that's kind of how that all came about.
I was a midwife wannabe.
Yeah. I mean, I got about halfway done before it was just like, it was so overwhelming. I had moved and gotten married and had a baby all in 1 year, and I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, there's lots of life experience that comes our way, maybe gets in the way, or maybe helps us along the way. But what did you say, a move and a baby?
Yep.
That alone in the same year
Yep.
is a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. So I know you have 3 beautiful children, Cooper, Sydney, and Harrison. And I really want to talk about your breastfeeding. And I know that you've had different kind of births, and I know the last birth was, in your words, pretty disastrous and epic. What I'd like to do is, let's see, maybe we can talk about your very first breastfeeding experience and the impact that had on you and your life, just because, you know, one day you're not pregnant, then you are, then you're pregnant, and then the next day you have a baby and you're breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. And I find for most of us, it's our whole world has been turned topsy-turvy, and most of it is good, but the topsy-turvy, overwhelmed, I don't know what I'm doing here, is pretty significant for most of us. So I'd like to talk about your first breastfeeding experience, and then I think there's a lot of learning to do with your third experience mm-hmm. or your feelings about it. So are you okay to touch on both of those?
Sure. And I can talk about all 3 because, I mean, the one in the middle is pretty good too.
For your first one, I'd like to know when you were pregnant or at some point, what is it that you thought about breastfeeding and how did you plan for it, if at all?
Interesting, because I was a labor and delivery nurse at that time, clearly. I just knew. I mean, that's what I was going to do, of course. And I also had these grand plans that I was just going to come waltzing in and have a baby. And it was going to be like, you know, I'm not going to come in until I'm 8 centimeters and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And of course, that's not the way it happened at all. So I just always figured, you know, that was just going to happen. I was just going to breastfeed, and that's the end of it. I did end up with a C-section. My water broke, and then finally did get into labor on my own, and then pushed for about 3 hours before they said this baby's not coming down. And he was little. He was 5'15". And I was just so devastated. Like, I can't believe I can't push this baby out, especially after I learned how big he was. But as far as breastfeeding was, he was just in there like weird, kind of. He just wasn't coming down. As far as breastfeeding, like right afterwards, I mean, and this was kind of before the whole skin-to-skin push. He was on my chest. I have pictures of it. I don't, you know, some parts of that I don't remember. It's been a while. I think he did really well from the beginning. And I remember having to pump just a little tiny bit in the hospital and giving some to him in a syringe. Now, I don't know where I came up with that idea, but that's what I did. I remember when I was home and my milk wasn't in yet, and he was kind of frantic, and so I did give him a bottle, and that held him over, and then the next morning, bam, my milk was in, and we were off. No other issues. He was something.
That's great. It sounds like your milk came in pretty early and things went well, so I bet you your little baby bulked up pretty quickly.
Yeah, all my kids have been on the smaller side at birth, and they're still small, kind of not even on the curve. And they always have been, so it's not worrisome to me. Yeah, I mean, he did gain weight, and I remember taking him into work one day to weigh him because, I don't know, and I don't even know why I did that, but I obviously was wondering, I wonder if he's gaining anything. But I remember going into work and getting him weighed and thinking, and weighing him after a feed, before and after a feed, and thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe he just got that much. It's crazy how many ounces they get at a feeding. It's
fun to see, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. He nursed for over a year, and just about right until I got pregnant with Sydney, and he just kind of weaned himself. I just remember thinking, right after I figured out I was pregnant again, he didn't really want anything to do with it. And so that's when I figured, I guess that changes things a bit.
It does.
It doesn't taste the same.
And that's a lot. That's the supply goes down majorly, the flavor changes. Yeah. There are many reasons why some kiddos just wean at that point. They self-wean.
Right.
I'm curious to know, did you return to work after Cooper was born, before pregnant?
Yes, I was always one of those people that said, once I have babies, I'm going to stay home with them. That's what I'm going to do. And then once I had babies, I was like, nope, I got to go back to work. And I think part of it was because we had moved and I was in a new place. I didn't really know that many people, and being home with the baby is very isolating. And I didn't get involved with my mom's group until I moved back here to Toledo. I so wish I would have figured that out at that time, but I was just trying to kind of stay afloat there for a while.
Yeah, so going back to work was social support for you also, right?
Yep. And I didn't work full time. I worked part time, and the hours really worked out. As a nurse, I could kind of pick my hours, so I usually didn't go in till 3 or something, and so it was just like ideal. It was very ideal.
And so with Sydney, you worked through your pregnancy part-time?
I did, and I was very strongly committed to a VBAC, even though on the outside, if you look at that, I'm a terrible candidate because I couldn't push out a 5'15" baby. I did yoga, I went to the chiropractor, I was like, everything is going to be lined up. I went to a midwife that I was really happy with, and it worked out perfectly.
Did you learn that while you had a C-section, did you learn that there was any good medical reason why you needed to cesarean?
I don't know if there was a good medical reason. I know that he asynclitic, and in that I mean he was not coming down in an ideal way, and I really feel like that was because I was about 8 centimeters when I got an epidural, and this was like, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I was exhausted, and I laid there and slept probably 3-4 hours in the same position. And I really feel like that has a lot to do with it, which is one of the reasons that when I'm taking care of a patient in labor, I'm very cognizant of that. Like, you got to move, you got to move, you got to move.
Yeah, so before when you said, you had a small baby and, were you a candidate for a VBAC, I was curious to know if there was a medical reason or there may have been just the management of the whole labor and, getting an epidural, laying in the same spot, not up and moving and upright and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, and it was a place, I worked there.
Yeah, but you're a mother in labor. You're not the nurse anymore.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
All right, so you had your VBAC, it sounds like.
So I had a wonderful, oh my gosh, it was awesome VBAC in that I went into labor on my own, which is key, very key to a VBAC, and went in. And by the time because I kept saying, I don't want to go in yet, I don't want to go in yet. And my husband was like, we got to go. Like, he was starting to get nervous. Finally, when we got there, I was 10 centimeters dilated. And I can remember the nurse looking right at my face saying, Marguerite, you're 10 centimeters, you're 10 centimeters. And I said, great, can I get an epidural now? And then I was worried because then, I still had to push the baby out, which I've never done before. And so then I'm like, okay, I got to where I was before. Is this going to happen? And it did. And she was 1.5 pounds bigger.
What position were you in when you were pushing?
I was on my side finally.
Your midwife was there?
She was there, yep. And
Great.
yeah, the whole time I was watching the mirror like, I can't believe I'm pushing her out. I can't believe I'm pushing her. And I didn't even know what I was having either. And so when she came out, I was even more, I'll never forget it.
Very exciting. Mm-hmm. Are you now in the hospital where you were working at the time?
So this is a different hospital now. I was in Dayton now.
Very excellent. Mm-hmm. Breastfeeding with Sydney went well?
Oh yeah, she latched right on. It was, yeah, she was wonderful. She has never really had any issues with her. She kind of came out chunky and she stayed that way. I mean, she's probably one of the smallest in her class right now, but I'm not a big person. Neither is my husband.
Let's see, 4 years in between Sydney and Harrison. So she self-weaned herself also?
Yeah, she did.
And you're like, yeah.
I can remember being like, no, I don't want you to be done.
I know, when you're not ready, it's sad. But it's interesting because, people who don't really understand the whole breastfeeding thing and understand kiddos who are nursing past 6 months, they almost think like we're making them nurse. And any breastfeeding mother knows you cannot make a baby breastfeed if they do not want to breastfeed. Yeah, like, come on. I did that to my son. I was like, come on, sit down. Come sit on mommy's lap. Come on, let's go.
Come over here.
And you just can't make them. I don't know how you felt, but there were many, many months of every time I sat down, I was like a magnet, sitting down and it's time to nurse. And then there just comes a point where it's the polar opposite and you're sitting down and they just want to climb up and get going.
Yeah. No, you cannot nurse. I have a good book to read.
I know. Exactly. So now you come into your third pregnancy, and wowie zowie, did you have a totally different experience here?
Yeah, it was something.
So tell me about your pregnancy. Was your pregnancy fairly normal?
It was. I had an ultrasound at 20 weeks. With other babies, I only had one ultrasound because it's all I needed. And so my first ultrasound, they found the cleft lip and palate on him. I of course, started crying and crying and crying. And my husband's just like, it's okay. We can, it's fixable. It's, and I know it's fixable, but I'm thinking I'm not going to be able to breastfeed a baby. And that is the only thing that's going through my mind. I'm not going to be able to breastfeed this baby, or it's going to be really hard. One of the reasons I love having babies is to breastfeed them, So I was like, I knew this was going to be my last baby. I was devastated. I came right home. I Googled everything you could possibly Google about breastfeeding with a cleft lip, and I just cried and cried and cried, and I had to grieve it for a long time. I really think it took me, even after he was born, it took me probably a year to just get over that. Like, this is not going to happen the way I want it to happen.
And when did you have the ultrasound that revealed the cleft lip and palate?
This was the first one. It was probably at 22 weeks.
22 weeks. Yeah, that's hard because you have,
Yep.
It just changes the course of your whole pregnancy mindset, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Right. And, my plan was I'm going to have another VBAC. So I had something else to start, worrying about. Not worried, but I knew, of course, I could pump, and that was what I was going to do, but it's not the same. Clearly. So he was 36 weeks right on the nose, and when I started hemorrhaging at home, basically. And it was really bad. It was really bad. It was one of those where I told my husband, you just got to get me in the car. You got to get me in the car because I'm bleeding so bad. And if you call an ambulance, it's going to, and we always joke about in labor and delivery, because the only people who call ambulances to come to get you are the people who are contracting every half an hour or so. It's like not appropriate use of an ambulance.
You're home and your husband's home, mm-hmm. and your other kids are home.
Mm-hmm.
And you just start bleeding?
Yep.
Did you know what was happening?
No. I didn't know. And I was like, why am I bleeding so much? Why am I bleeding so much? And my husband said, just get me the car. Just get me the car. Because I knew if you call the squad and it takes them however long to get there. And I was just panicking because I'm like, I am 15 minutes away from a hospital,
Yeah, like just get me in the car.
Yeah,
right?
just get me in the car. And I think I was on the toilet at that point, and blood, just clots and blood's coming out and coming out. And I stood up. And I felt immediately dizzy, like I'd lost that much blood already. And I thought, oh, no. And I said, you better call the squad. And he said, that's good. I already did. Yeah, they took me in. And, I called my mom. Mom, come over right now. I called I called the charge nurse. I had worked that day. I had just been home for a couple hours.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so they were all ready for me, which is, I can't even stress how important that was to me to be able to deliver at a place, especially in a situation like that I knew everybody and knew they were, really doing their best for me.
Now, were you with midwives or?
I went to a midwife practice that they didn't come to the hospital I worked at. They went to like a smaller hospital. But as soon as they got the ultrasound report that he had a cleft lip, then we said, well, you know what, we need to go to Toledo Hospital because that's the best NICU. So they kind of changed it over there, which meant that their attending doctor had to come attend my birth because they didn't really come over there for that. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, he wasn't my favorite, but, whatever. I'm going to come in, I'm going to have a baby, and he's going to deliver it, and that, that'll be the end of it. And it's fine.
And what are you telling your husband at this point? Because you at this point, the RN of you, I'm sure, is kicking in, and you might have knowledge of what the possibilities might be, but then you also have the hopeful mother to be in labor, hoping you're going to get the birth that you want. So
right.
What is the conversation between you and your husband like?
If you were to meet him, he's very positive. He's not a pessimist in any way. And so he just kept saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We're going to get you to the hospital. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. That's how he is. And in my mind, I'm screaming, I'm going to die. I'm just, I can't say that to him because, he'd be like, nah, you're fine. You're fine. But I was really, really scared. So we go to the hospital, still bleeding. The doctor gets there. He breaks my water. We didn't go to have a C-section immediately, which in hindsight, I don't know. That probably was what I needed. But he said, let's just get this baby out, which was okay. Fine. Great. And so then I said, I'm going to get an epidural because I had already lost so much blood. I wasn't feeling good. My blood pressure was not great. The baby's heart rate was okay. It was still okay, which was what I was concerned about. And then I got an epidural, and then it just kind of went all downhill because when you get an epidural, your blood pressure decreases, and mine, I just didn't have enough volume in me to sustain that. So that's when it started getting really hazy for me. I remember a lot of, I don't feel good. And my mom, who has never seen any of our births, she has 12 grandchildren. She hasn't seen anybody's birth, but she came to see that one because she was worried about me, right? My dad came over, and then my mom came to the hospital. And later on, she said, I didn't see how much you were bleeding, but I could hear how much you were bleeding because it was like on the floor like a faucet.
Wow. And
so this is the birth that she comes to, right?
So it's good that she stuck it out because that's pretty traumatic for her, I'm sure.
Yeah. He basically pulled the baby out, and so, Harrison was okay. And then he was trying to get my placenta out, and he was pulling really hard. And then apparently my uterus came out. And everything that could happen happened to me, which means it was inverted because my placenta was attached. So it ends up that I had an accreta, which means that the placenta is growing into the uterus, which we didn't know. So it wouldn't come off.
I'm just curious, the ultrasounds that you had, it didn't show that at all?
No, it didn't. And I know the MFM docs, because after this had all gone down, they went back because they thought, oh, did we miss something? And they looked at my ultrasounds again and said, no, we couldn't see it. And I did ask them. They said it was about 50% of the time that you can tell on ultrasound. When I did a little more research into it, it looks like it's more like 80% that you can tell, but certainly not all the time. So yes, I was at a higher risk because I had a C-section before.
So he's manually removing your placenta and your uterus comes with it?
Mm-hmm. And then at that point, they said, we got to go back to the OR. And I was like,
are you like present in the room? Because everything is so traumatic and blood loss, and you were able to pay attention?
I kept saying, I don't feel good. I kept kind of like blanking out when they said we're going to go to the OR. And this is like, I was at the hospital probably 3 hours before he was born, which seems forever to me, looking back on it. When they took me out of the room, I just looked at my husband and said, take care of my babies. He said, you're going to be fine, he says. And then they took me to the OR and tried a couple things that we usually do, tried to stop the bleeding. That didn't work. And finally the doctor said, I really want you to see your son grow up. So I need to take your uterus. okay. Okay.
He said those words?
He said those exact words.
Yeah, were you feeling like you were going to die?
I never had the feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to die. But I felt really bad. And the way that people were scrambling and, the anesthesiologist was yelling, we have to get her blood. So many things that happened. But I'm an O negative blood type. Plus I have a lot of antibodies. My blood had to be really screened to be able to use it, to have it used on me. But at some point, I remember anesthesia just screaming, you have to get blood up here. She's going to die if you don't. And me looking at our CRNA, who, I work with all the time, and looking at her and saying, please don't let me die. And her saying at some point they were trying to get some sort of line on me. And she said, does she have a pulse? And I'm sitting there looking at her like, I'm looking at you. Of course I have a pulse, but apparently I wasn't there.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal.
Yeah, very traumatic.
And you remember this. You remember a lot of details.
I remember a lot of details. I was crying. I was looking about people in the room, and one of my nurse friends, can you just hold my hand, please? Right,
yeah.
It was bad. And then I woke up in the ICU, and there I was, intubated for 2 more days. So it ended up I had, I don't remember how much blood they gave me, a lot of blood and platelets, and it was bad. But, first thing I did when I woke up, I said, did they take my ovaries? I don't know why you were so concerned about that, but, I need a pump. It's basically one of the first things I said.
Did they take my ovaries and I need to pump? It's amazing what our mind does, isn't it?
Like, this is so important, and I made them bring me a pump, or I made them help me pump. I mean, I had a tube down my throat every 3 hours, and it'd wake me up. And I know they didn't want to. Who wants to wake up somebody who's just been through all that to pump? Well, hello, You haven't met me.
Hello, you haven't met me.
Right. That's not sure you know me, but you need to bring me my pump. And
oh, Marguerite, that's so funny. I mean, in a very stressful, traumatic birth, I'm hoping you're okay with me laughing about certain things.
You just have to laugh, right?
They were probably like, this mom does not need to pump. We need to take care of her.
Yeah, that's what they were thinking. I know it was. Yeah. And to me, that was like, that's my one thing. Because he was in the NICU, I couldn't even see him. It was like the worst thing. Yeah, I pumped, and luckily, a lot of people don't know. I don't think I knew that if you have a huge blood loss like that, you are at risk for not producing milk.
Major high risk, yes.
Yep. And so I didn't know that, and I think I'm glad I didn't, because I would have really freaked out more than I did. I started producing pretty much right away. Eventually, they brought him to me. From the NICU, they brought him to me. I didn't have pictures. Those are the first pictures I have of me with all these tubes and lines and holding my baby. It was just bliss. And, I was just pumping and pumping and pumping. And I got out of the ICU. I went to see him. I put him to breast, of course, right? Because that's what I do. And he started nursing. But I think it was my milk was in, and he didn't have to do anything. It was just coming into his mouth.
Yeah, like any other baby that mommies have what I call bursting boobs.
Yeah.
You just put a little pressure on there.
Yeah, and so then I was all excited, like, oh, he did it. He didn't really.
He did.
Well, he did, but
there.
Yeah, so.
How many days old was he until you first were able to see him and hold him?
I think they brought him to me his second day, and then the next day I was transferred to a regular floor, to our postpartum floor, and then I could go see him.
You had a little bit of home court advantage in that if you breastfed before, you made milk before, it's like your body has this memory of what it did and what it's supposed to do, and so you may have been in a better position having birthed and breastfed twice before with regards to the volume of milk that you were able to make in relationship to the blood loss that you had. Sometimes, though, all the statistics we have, it's like, okay, that's what the statistics are, but I'm flowing with milk,
that's
so
right.
Who cares?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, of course, it's not 100% of the time, but.
So tell me, at that time, did you have lactation consultants in the hospital or a physician in the hospital that was knowledgeable about babies with clefts and breastfeeding?
I don't think so. I know that when I went up to the NICU and I said, I want to nurse him, do you have any pointers for me or whatever. And they said, let me get somebody. They brought in another NICU nurse who was like, okay, get your breast out. And I was like, oh, no. I've done this twice before. I want to know specifically about. And she was like, oh, I don't know. Like, nobody had.
She was just going to tell you what you already knew to do.
Yeah. Put him skin to skin, see, and I was like, no, I got that. I wanted more specific information, and I feel like I probably should have sought that out more. I don't know if I just had it in my mind that he's not going to do it and that's it, or I don't know. I don't remember.
During your pregnancy, when you had the ultrasounds at that time, were you given was it very broad information, or was it specific information as to the degree of the clefts and when you might expect to be able to have surgery for him?
Yes, that was one thing. Like, really, you can't know completely until he's actually born. But there was palate involvement. It wasn't a huge amount of palate involvement, but it was, and it wasn't like super wide. So, and it was only unilateral. So there were 3 things there that made it a little better. And then I did have a consult with the plastic surgeon before he was even born. The guy who does most of the plastic surgery for cleft lips in our area, and he runs a cleft clinic, and he's really fantastic. So he kind of gave me here's what to expect, and that was really helpful too.
So your plan in going in with feeding your baby, you went in with the mindset that you were going to be pumping and bottle feeding.
I was hoping that, from what I read, like if he could create a seal, that he would be able to breastfeed. And then that just, we didn't get off to a good start. We were separated. And when he finally was home with me, I can remember, I would always try and put him to breast first, always. At 3:00 in the morning when you're tired, and I was still recovering, obviously. And, I had a lot going on. I had 2 other children. And so he just never did very well. And so
and you have to feed your baby, right?
Right. And he was little. I mean, he was my smallest one. He was 5'10" when he was born.
Actually, 5'10" at 36 weeks is pretty darn good.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. Like I said, I have small babies. So he gained well. So I ended up just pumping. I mean, that was my life.
Taking a little break so I can share this info with you. I am really psyched to be able to share this next piece of news with you. My regular listeners are very familiar at this point with Momentum, the organization that I talk about on each show. You know, the one that I say saved my life as a new mother, the organization that helped me find other mothers who were new at this whole mothering thing. They became my people. They helped me navigate that first year of motherhood and continue to mother me as I had more kids, and my need for support through their toddler years and kindergarten years and elementary school years just kept being needed. I made lifelong friends, and they were so helpful that I am doing all I can to continue to support the organization. I want Momentum to continue to thrive, and I want you, my All About Breastfeeding audience, to experience just some of what Momentum is all about. The ladies of Momentum have agreed to give my listeners a 14-day trial membership so you can see what this Mother Center thing is all about at no cost to you. Just hop on over to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. You will see a link from Momentum. It's in blue, and you just click it on and it will bring you to the page for you to sign up for your free trial. Honestly and truly, there's absolutely no cost to you. This is just a great opportunity for you to enjoy the discussion groups and the blogs and webinars and educational pieces that are available for free for you. I will have a link to this in the show notes. And now, back to the show. So tell me about the pumping. What kind of pump did you use, and what was your routine like in the very early days?
So he was born in March, and I still had, Sydney was still at home with me. And so I rented a hospital grade pump for the first month. I never had problems with milk supply before, so I didn't really think it would be a problem. I just wanted to really make sure I got a good supply going. So I rented for the first month, probably didn't need to do that, but I did. And then after that, I just used my regular, like Medela, whatever I had. I pumped for close to a year. I pumped.
Was there a point when you were able to back off of the frequency of the pumping?
Yes. There was a while that I got up in the middle of the night and did it, and probably did that for close to a month, I would think. And then I stopped doing the middle of the night thing, and then gradually just would drop a pump every now and then. But I was pretty consistent with it. I mean, I would take that pump everywhere. I was pumping everywhere. I mean, I was at baseball games and pumping, and I can remember going to Mother Center, a meeting, I think it was a leadership meeting or something, and I'm in the background, wah, 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 oh, Marguerite's here. I had to feed my baby, and he needed that milk, so.
What are some of even just one of your best pumping tip that you could pass on to an exclusively pumping mama?
Oh my goodness. So as a lactation consultant now, when I go in, people say, I'm just going to pump and feed, and I say, really?
It's not what you want to start off doing if you don't have to.
I did that, and it was not fun. But I always was like, those pumping bras, where with the holes in them.
Yeah, that you get to be hands-free.
Yeah, I always thought, oh, those are the dumbest things. Why do you need those? And then I was like, this is the best thing ever!
Yeah.
Because I could actually, hold him while I was doing that. Or
drive? I'm sure you drove while pumping.
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I never did that.
Oh, my goodness.
No, I didn't. I pumped when other people were driving.
When I talk about that to moms, almost all are they're just looking at me weird, and then I'm like, just give it a try. Just give it a try. And
yeah.
Almost always moms are like, I am so glad you kind of pushed me into just giving it a try, because I just, like you say about the hands-free bra, moms say, I just don't know how I could ever how I could ever keep doing this if I didn't pump while I drove.
Yeah.
And I have one mom who, she needed it so bad. She had 4 other kids, long story, but she just she could not breastfeed her 5th. She had to exclusively pump. And she ran around all day doing errands, She was a homeschool mom in the morning. And so I said, and she was, going crazy with it. And I kept saying, just try. And she's like, she built up all these fears. Well, what if something happens and I get into an accident? Do they have laws against pumping it? All this stuff. And what about the other kids? And what if I get distracted? So one day I said to her, and her baby was about 2 months old, and I said, take a half hour and put all your kids in the car and take the pump, get the hands-free bra, set yourself up, but don't go on a long car ride. Be in the car for a half hour, but just keep driving circles around a 3 or 4 mile square around your neighborhood, and just put the pump on and just see how it feels. And she this is about 3 years ago, and she texted me, and she was as excited about that as you were about the pump bra. She's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I haven't done this before. She just swears that that's the way that she survives. So everybody has a way of surviving and making better as best as you can the exclusive pumping. So for you, a big thing was the hands-free bra.
Right. And I had it I'm sitting in the chair now that I pumped for so long in my bedroom. And I had just done it for so long that for me to even think about pumping anywhere else in the house was just really weird to me. This is my pumping chair,
That's your pumping chair.
But my pump.
You think you'll ever get rid of that pumping chair? You're going to be attached to it
No,
forever.
Probably not.
I know I had a big Lazy Boy chair that I spent after my first pregnancy. I got it during my second pregnancy, and that's how I slept half the time.
Yeah.
It was one of those Lazy Boy chairs that go all the way back, and so I spent pregnancy time and untold endless hours nursing babies in that chair, and we had it for another 20 years, way after we should have gotten rid of it.
Yep.
And about 2 years ago, I finally got rid of it. It was in such poor shape, but it was there were some things like the baby's clothes, one of the special things, or I took apart one of their diaper bags and I just saved a portion of it. There are some things that we can, but there was no way to save a chair forever.
Right.
So, but I know that attachment to it.
Very much. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But I can remember the last time I pumped, and I got up in the morning and I said, I am not doing this anymore. I just looked at my pump and said, I'm done. I just hit the wall and said, I can't do it. One more time.
Did you have a stash built?
Yes. And he was eating solids by then. He had surgery.
And how is Harrison doing now?
He's great. He's great. He had a surgery when he was about 3 months old for the lip closure. And then at a year, he had the palate done. He's got at least one more major surgery probably in the next 3 years. He's doing really well.
And you found surgeons close to your home?
Yep. We have a really great one right here in Toledo. So I was very happy with him.
So what advice would you give a mother who finds out during her pregnancy that she may not be able to breastfeed her baby, or just getting a heads up that it's going to be a huge challenge?
Get a hold of the lactation consultants in your town or wherever it may be. Maybe have a consult with them beforehand. That would probably really be helpful. The one thing that was really helpful for me when I found out that I was going to have this baby that had special problems is most counties, I got connected up with our Help Me Grow program, which is called different things in different counties. But, I mean, they're kind of responsible from birth till 3 for, everything. So I was set up with a counselor or a case manager, I guess it was, and she would come out to see us. And he got speech. I mean, it was all through the state, it was all through the county. And so he got all these things free until he was 3. And they were a super resource that I just cannot say enough about. And I know that most people, when they think about that, think, oh, it's for low income people that's part of their mission. It is for, babies that come into the world that have, certain needs.
Yeah, and I know quite a few moms who are connected to organizations like that, and it is really a full package of getting various help for your baby, not just in one area. And you're just thrown into a whole new world. If you have your first baby who has some particular special needs and you're just thrown into that world, or if you have a couple of kids that you haven't had to deal with similar problems and now you're thrown into the world. Yeah. I don't know that it's better or worse, but I just know that moms definitely need to get connected where they can have a whole village helping them with different needs for your baby.
For sure.
And coming to your home is fabulous.
Yes. I can remember when I first got, I came home from that ultrasound, just crying, and immediately went on to, I think it was Mother Center, and put on there, hey, I just had an ultrasound. This is what happened. Does anybody have any resources? Or, I just put it out there right away because I knew this was going to be, I just needed support. I needed help. And that was really helpful.
So I love Mother Center. So you probably got some feedback, maybe in another mom or two who had been dealing with several issues, or maybe at least knew the resources and places for you to go to.
Yep. Some people said, gosh, you didn't even have time to process that before you're telling everybody. I'm like, well, that's part of how I'm processing it. But also, why wouldn't you reach out to, why keep it to yourself for that whole time and make yourself just miserable with the what ifs and the everything?
Because we're all built differently.
Yeah, I know.
And you're right. I mean, that was a perfect answer. You said, well, that's how I am processing it. And the person who asked you that question may have been the type of person who needs to sit and think and contemplate and cry and scream and then start coming through the other side before they start talking about it.
Right. Well, I did that too. I did it all at once.
How wonderful. Everybody, all my listeners, all of our breastfeeding listeners know that I love Mother Center Momentum.
Uh-huh.
And I sponsor them here on the podcast, and we have an offer for a 14-day trial. They'll hear the little blurb about it. And so I'm really glad that you were connected with Mother Center at this point in your life, too.
I just cannot say enough about it. I certainly don't go to meetings like I used to. But when we moved to Toledo, and I had 2 little babies, I remember going to a preschool thing and saying, there was a girl there sitting at my table. It was a fundraiser, and she said something about her mom's group. And, my antenna was like, bing! What did you say about a mom's group? And so I made her tell me about it. And then I went the next week, and I was there and I can remember times I would just come in, and I had 2 little kids, and I would come in and I would drop them off at the little child care, and I'd come in to the mom's part, and I would sit down in my seat and I would just cry. Cause I just, so overwhelmed. And
you knew you could do it there. You also said something that was fun. You're like, she said something about her mom's group, and you made her tell you
yeah,
more.
I did. I was like, what is this? Tell me. What? And yeah, I think she was a little hesitant. I don't know why. I think it was just the person she was, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, some people, I think they look at me cross-eyed too, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like the reason I was a sane mother is because of Mother Center. They saved my sanity, right?
So true. I mean, that was the one thing I could look forward to. You know, I know every Thursday I'm going there, and we're going, and
yeah, and to be able to put your stuff, you know, just put the kids in a childcare, walk to the next room or wherever it was, and then put your stuff down and then just unload and cry and not have people think you're crazy and run.
Yeah, right. And several times after that, when people, you know, like later years, somebody would come in and they would just, you know, start crying when they were talking to me, and I would, you know, I know, you know. I don't even know need to say anything to you. I know.
For a while, my goal became, well, try not to cry along with them, too, right?
Or try not to cry every time you go there.
I try not to cry. Yeah, like, wouldn't that be nice to just sit down and with a smile on my face, right?
Oh, my goodness. But some of my best friends I've made from that time in my life.
And one of them is Kate Fineski, who shared your information and introduced me to you. So thank you, Kate.
Yeah, our boys, Harrison and her little boy are in a music class together. So that's kind of when we started talking about, hey, I'd had this new podcast I was listening to, and again, you know, my antenna, bing, and I immediately went and downloaded the episodes and listened to them. So
great. So I'd also like to hear just a little bit about being a labor and delivery nurse, but also your experiences with breastfeeding. At some point, you got turned on to breastfeeding so much that you decided to become an IBCLC.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it for a while, and I didn't realize how strongly, I mean, I do feel strongly about it, but I didn't realize how strongly ingrained it was in me. I recently was talking to a friend of mine that I went to nursing, or I lived with her when I was in nursing school, and she said she just had her first baby, and she said, I can remember you were in nursing school talking about breastfeeding. And I was like, really? I don't remember that.
That probably raised a flag for her, like, this woman's talking about breastfeeding? She doesn't even have a baby?
She's not pregnant? Yeah, I don't know. I think part of it was Harrison's birth and just going through that whole emotional thing. A lot of people would have said, okay, I can't breastfeed. Okay, that's it. But for me, it was so much more than that. It was so psychologically damaging to me. I don't know, because that was so important to me. I've just always been really interested in it, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. A per diem position opened at the hospital I work at, and they hired me, but I didn't have my IBCLC yet, and so they hired me with the, you know, they said you need to get your credentials by a year from now. So that's what I did.
What a fabulous opportunity. If you've been around other IBCLCs, frequently we struggle with trying to figure out how to get all the education, the clinical experience, and then the next thing is, how do we get someone to hire me?
Right. Things happen in the right time, at the right place, and you just happen to be where you need to be.
And so now you work part-time as an RN on the floor and part-time as a lactation consultant?
I'm still per diem with lactation, but they're pretty flexible. We have a really, really great group. And I'm known, on the labor delivery floor as the breastfeeding crazy person, basically. Yeah, of course you're going to breastfeed, and of course you're going to do this. And if they have a problem with
you're on their speed dial.
Yep. Or if I'm there and it's not even my patient, can you come in and help me? And
so you enjoy your job?
I do.
That's great.
I like both jobs.
Tell me one thing about lactation consultant in the hospital that you find most challenging.
I find I'm frequently frustrated because the education is lacking, and so people don't understand how it works, basically. They don't understand that you have to put your baby to breast often to have a good milk supply. So we see these moms in the hospital, and so they're there 2 days, and then they go home with their baby. Sometimes that 24 hours they're not really nursing well yet. A lot of times you work with them over and over and over, and then the next day you come in and say, yeah, I've decided I'm going to bottle feed. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, that's a big downer, right?
Yeah.
because you put so much into it, and you frequently know that their situation is not incredibly challenging. They're still new at it, and isn't there a part of you that's like, oh, if I had, just a few more days with you, we could really get this solid, right?
That, and, but, they're going home to who knows what.
Yeah.
A lot of times. And a lot of times, a lot of women feel like, oh, I should do it because that's what I'm supposed to do. So I feel like if you go into it like that, you're unlikely to be successful.
Just like anything else, it's like if you're going to school because there have been 3 lawyers in your family and your heart isn't in it, but that's what you're doing, you're not going to be a good lawyer, you're not going to be a happy lawyer, or maybe you're just going to drop out after your first semester.
Yeah.
Because it's not what your heart wants you to. There's less women that are doing it just because they think they should. And while that does happen, but there are more women who are starting off breastfeeding because they really want everything that breastfeeding can be for them. They want the touch, they want the benefits, the health benefits for them, they want it for their baby, they want it for the cuddling. There's so much that they want from it, but those first few days when they're a struggle, I don't know in your experience, but in my experience, there's a huge drop off if things are a little tough in the first 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
By the end of the 2 weeks, they're done.
Yep. Yeah, our numbers really go south somewhere around that 2-week mark.
But you're in there in the trenches doing your absolute best. And, that's what I always say. I'm like, I am here for you. If this is something you want to do, we are going to work on it until you feel like it's going well, and then you don't need me anymore.
Right.
But if it's not something that you really want to do, then that's okay too. And you'll just, basically just kind of go to the next mom and put your energy into her because
but that's,
you said something before, like we don't go home with them, right?
Yeah. But it's so frustrating because why wouldn't you do the best thing for your baby? Why wouldn't you? I don't understand that. Why wouldn't you at least attempt it?
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think it's sometimes, here's the thing is also, and you, my goodness, have been through a lot. And so you've earned every right to even think that even more so than the next person. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But I think what happens is, I've run hundreds of thousands of postpartum groups over the years, and what some mothers say is I was literally at my worst physically and emotionally. And if you had asked me 6 months later when I was back in my own body, back to myself, I wasn't sleep deprived, I wasn't so hormonal, I wasn't so overwhelmed with the shock of becoming a mom, like now I could take on this important skill of learning how to breastfeed. So it's like,
just give me 3 months.
Yeah, it almost is like kind of a trick of nature. Like it's like the worst time to learn one of the most important skills you will ever need to learn if you're planning on breastfeeding your baby. And we're not in the best environment. We're not feeling our best physically, emotionally. We have all these strangers around us, or even if we're in our own home, there's just so much about all of a sudden being a mother that is foreign to us. And I think that definitely plays a part in the, I just can't do this anymore.
Well, I agree, Lori, but I also feel like that's where we're just missing a part of that. That education could be done beforehand, just saying, this is going to be hard. It's going to be hard, but this is important, and this is why it's important, and this is like the basics of what you can do. I feel strongly about that. I think that people who come to our breastfeeding classes, I teach classes as well, I think they really benefit from that. So,
like I teach breastfeeding classes, and about 5 minutes into the class, I'm literally saying, I know this might sound like I'm a Debbie Downer. That's my favorite saying.
Yeah.
But I don't need to talk to you an hour to an hour and a half about all the wonderful benefits of breastfeeding.
Right.
You're well educated. You know that. And you're saying, I want to breastfeed, and you're taking the time, energy, money, and you're attending the class. What I want you to know is that if it goes really easy for you, then you're a sleep-deprived mom who's somewhat hormonal, and you'll have questions about breastfeeding. But if you're having problems, that's all the information I want to teach you. I want to talk to you about the most common problems that happen in that first 3 to 4 days to 7 days, how to figure out that you are having a problem, what to do about it on your own, and if you cannot, then here's the resources, and make that call much sooner than later. So I give them the tips, I talk about your baby shouldn't be sleeping at the breast. I think you're a lot like me. You're giving them the tools. Like, you're not saying this is all so beautiful and wonderful. Like everybody, we already know that, and you will get to that. But classes, I think, are really for people to understand what the most common hiccups are along the way.
And that what is normal? Like, how do you know that you're giving your baby enough milk? I mean, I get that.
Right.
That's especially as a first-time mom. How do you know? That's scary. But
right, and that's all about, like, when I talk about prevention, it's talking about what's normal and what's not. And so in the business of talking about the hard times that some moms have, we're also saying, well, that shouldn't be, because your baby should be outputting this, your baby should be, and then go through the whole litany. So I think you're right. We're missing huge opportunities for education. There's lots of breastfeeding mismanagement, and anybody who knows me, one of my jokes is, I have a couple of jokes and mantras, but one of them is, if I had Oprah's money, I would make sure that every mom who plans on breastfeeding takes a very excellent class beforehand, gets connected to the right people, and has someone seeing her day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7.
Right, like in Europe.
And yes, and when you're seen each and every day, and you can be with moms working out any of the challenges that they have, that certainly some are much bigger than others, but a majority are all easily workable with the right person and the right plan in that first 7 days, and then you can be off and running.
And I think it's all mixed together, because we have, a huge infant mortality rate in this country. We have a huge maternal mortality rate in this country. And I think, all of that can be related to it too. How do we best help our moms? How do we best serve them? Best thing for the babies, so the babies can be less sick and less unhealthy. And I mean, it's all part of it.
And I'll just end with one of the things that I've been telling moms is that when they're like, well, the pediatrician said it's okay if it doesn't work out,
right?
And they go to the whole formula thing, or, what's become more popular and almost seems more acceptable, it's okay if it doesn't work out. You can always pump and bottle feed so your baby can get your milk. And I talk to moms about, this is another thing we can go on forever about, but that you're breastfeeding, there's so much more to your baby actually getting your milk, because you can do that in a bottle. But there's many other benefits to the actual art of putting your baby to the breast. And, what I say to moms is what I want our physicians to do is say, this isn't working. Man, you got to get help. Here's a script to a lactation consultant. Here's a script to a group. Here's a like a sense of urgency. Like, oh my goodness, like you have bow legs or hip dysplasia or torticollis or flathead or whatever. Cleft lip. Yeah, like there's a sense of urgency that I want our physicians to have with mothers who want to breastfeed, who are having difficulties. I want them to say that's the top priority. We have to figure this out now. If you need to supplement, well, you're going to supplement, and that's okay. That's what you need to do. But we are going to work on fixing breastfeeding too.
Yeah.
And I just feel like we don't have that sense of urgency, like it's a big health problem. And I really want to bring that sense of urgency into the practices.
Right. I wish we could have lactation consultants in the pediatrician practices, because I think that would be really helpful, especially around here. Our pediatricians are not, some of them are all right, but the ones that come to the hospital, a lot, we've gone round and round with a lot of things with low blood sugars, and we're trying to address that, and it's a big challenge.
Yeah, there are some pediatric practices who do have a lactation consultant, IBCLC, in their office, and I love
yeah,
that.
Of course.
When we're done here, all my listeners will hear me talk a little bit about some of the things that I offer to help them with breastfeeding classes and such. And what I really want you to do is to just send me any information that you have about resources that you have for around the country or in the town that you work with. And that would be great for my listeners to have. I can put that in the show notes. So
I don't know if I have much, but we'll see.
Well, you never know. Even the resource that you had for Harrison about getting connected with the home care, you never know what people know and who will need what you have. we're all about education, and we have a huge opportunity to educate with this podcast, so that's what I'm all about.
Yep, it's important. Find your resources and find your people.
Marjorie, if anybody wanted to connect with you on either Facebook or an email, do you have a way that they can contact you?
You can email me, marguerite31@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. You can search my name. Most of my Facebook stuff is ranting about one thing or another.
What I love about it is people can decide to just click along, go away, get rid of it, or whatever. It's easy for them to make that choice. Thank you so much, Marguerite. We got into a lot of good stuff, got a little bit of a tangent later on in the podcast, but I think it's good for people to hear two lactation consultants talking about the biz.
Yep, it's important.
And our challenges. All right, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, there we go, all about breastfeeding, people. I hope you enjoyed the show. If Marguerite's breastfeeding experience resonates with you, feel free to connect with her on her Facebook page and let her know how you feel and ask her any questions that you have. I know she can be a huge help for anyone who has really wanted to breastfeed but realized that it was just not going to be possible for them. I also wanted to make a note in that Marguerite talked about renting a hospital-grade electric pump and then switched to her personal pump a short time later. She did not have any problems building a good supply, and she even stored a lot extra. While this worked well for her, I just wanted to jump in here to state that this is not usually the case. Most women who are using a pump for exclusive pumping purposes to replace all feedings at the breast, most women will need to use a hospital-grade pump to establish and maintain a good supply for their baby. I talk more about this in detail about hospital-grade pumps in episode number 64. Also, another reminder to go on Facebook, search for All About Breastfeeding Community, and join our new group where we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that happens on the show. And my hope is that you will feel comfortable enough in a non-judgmental space to share your breastfeeding story. I really want to hear your stories, and I want to hear your struggles and what you're celebrating, how many months you've been breastfeeding, anything else that you want to talk about breastfeeding. The group is really meant for emotional support from mom to mom. Hope to see you there.